The moment is here, you can stop your search. It's Comics by Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. Well, this is kind of a tough story to unpack because there's the reality of what's being said from a business perspective, and then there's the reality of what actually might happen. And what actually might happen is a bit of speculation on my part, of course. How can it not be? But I'll give you kind of a historical perspective of what's happened. But this is the kind of video and commentary that's pretty much guaranteed to be massively misinterpreted. So we're going to give it a shot, and I'll give you the facts, and I'll give you my opinion of what's going to happen. And feel free to kind of come at me and disagree with my opinion on things all you want. But just know that there's this is coming from a position of history as opposed to a position of what I'd like to see happen. Okay, so you got to. I'll try and separate the bits out for you. But basically, Bill Willingham, of which there's an interview with Bill up on this channel. You can check it out. It's in the playlist. You can hear directly from the source. And he talked for quite a while with us. He has declared that Fables is now public domain. Now, Fables is a comic, and it's probably one of the, I'm going to say this in a weird way, but this is what a lot of retailers say it. It's the second gen Vertigo titles that did well. So if you think about the first gen, you had things like Doom Patrol, Sandman, etc. that got a lot of attention. And then Fables came along a little bit after that. And it was probably the showrunner of that second kind of, version of what Vertigo is all about. Again, unless you're a retailer, this probably makes very little sense. But that's kind of how a lot of us viewed it, where that was kind of the headliner. Fables, if you haven't read it, it's a good comic. The idea is that it's, storybook Fables characters in the real world. Some claim that Once Upon a Time was a heavy ripoff of that. I mean, yes and no. The idea, the basic idea of Fables is not that unique of a one. I'm sure Bill might disagree, but the idea of, what if storybook characters were real? Fine. That's not the most unique idea. But where Bill took it was very unique, and the stories were very good. So it's not diss against Bill. It's just you take a common premise and you do something new with it, becomes pretty cool. But anyway, Bill Willingham has said he's basically firing DC Comics. And then, there were a bunch of comments about, well, the artist Mark Buckingham was busy. He's doing stuff over at Marvel. And then he basically said, I'm making Fables public domain. And, he's got a blog that details a lot of that. We won't go through all of it, but basically he's saying that kind of this big series. Well, here's a quote. Fables is fully creator-owned by me, meaning by Bill, not creator-controlled. DC has most publication and media rights locked up in contract. So what good does ownership have in such a situation? Basically, he's bemoaning something that a lot of comic creators have, which is, creators can control it, but if a publisher or a company can dictate kind of when things actually get produced and how they actually go into market, then, what good does it do to be in charge of it? Because even if you're in charge of it, you make decisions, unless the publisher goes along with it or responds to you, then nothing actually happens. So he basically said, as of now, 15th of September, 2023, the comic book property called Fables, including all related Fables spin-offs and characters, is now in the public domain. What was once wholly owned by Bill Willingham is now owned by everyone. And I should say at this point, before I continue with this statement, that's only partially true. Again, that goes to what Bill himself has said. He fully owns it, but if somebody else controls, the way it goes out into the world, then is that full ownership? I mean, it is, but it's also not. It's kind of like saying, hey, you can fully own a car, but if you want to drive it on the roads, we get to tell you when you can and can't do that. So then what good does it mean to have a car? A car is meant to be driven on roads. If you own the car but not the roads, and people don't let you drive your car on the roads, then what good is having the car? It's kind of what's going on here. That's as an analogy. So, so when he says it's now owned by everyone, okay, there may be some scrutiny, and if somebody gets a version of Fables that's really popular, is DC going to sue? 100% they're going to sue, for sure. But it basically means that just because you own Fables doesn't mean that DC is naturally going to be obligated or publish it. You got to go figure that out on your own. So, okay. That's not, by the way, it doesn't take anything away from Bill's statement. It's just, I've read some takes of like, oh, now all of us are going to publish our own Fables comics. Well, you can, but you got to figure out how a way to get to market. That doesn't come with the ownership of the characters. Anyway, he says, it's done, and as most experts will tell you, once done, it cannot be undone. Probably the only take-backs are neither contemplated nor possible. Not really. Take-backs are absolutely possible. Absolutely. They've happened all the time. Now, they're expensive. Does DC and Warner Media have the effort and the energy to go out and do this? Well, no, but here's one scenario where they will. If, for example, some kind of random person independently goes out and makes a Fables something, and then it takes off. It gets really, really popular. People start buying it, starts making lots of money. Then, will suddenly DC and Warner try and figure out a way to do some takebacks? Sure. Just like Disney has in the past, just like Warner has in the past with other things. So, the pathetic part about the legal system and trademarks and everything else is popularity and success often means, that if it's not popular and not making a lot of money, people do nothing. And if it's making a lot of money, then suddenly they want some of it. So it's crazy how that works. Anyway. Willingham went through a bunch of reasons why he's doing this and what he's doing and all the rest. And people wrote me, say, well, what do you think about all this? And I'll give you my personal opinion. My personal opinion is somebody who likes Fables, who owns every single copy. I have the original issues of all the Fable series. And I'm a huge fan of Buckingham, for sure. And I like Willingham. I think he's a very good writer. I understand that now there's all this, he's talking to the wrong people on social media and whatever he's doing. Oh, okay. That's fair. You can certainly like or dislike somebody for that. But as a writer, I liked Fables. I thought he wrote good stories. So I'm talking about it from somebody who reads comics. I think they're good. And I like Buckingham, so that's good too. But he gave lots of reasons in terms of, practicality, what he could do, philosophy and everything else. But here's the bit that is probably the most interesting to kind of talk through. He says, what has DC Comics done to provoke this? So I'll read it to you. It says, too many things to list exhaustively, but there are some highlights. Throughout the years of my business relationship with DC, with Fables, and with other intellectual properties, DC has always been in violation of their agreements with me. Usually it's in smaller matters, like forgetting to seek my opinion on artists for new stories, or for covers, or formats of new collections, and such. In those times, when called on it, they automatically said, sorry, we overlooked you again. It just fell through the cracks. They used the fell through the cracks line so often and so reflexively that I eventually had to bar them from using it ever again. They're often late reporting royalties, and often underreport said royalties, forcing me to go after them to pay the rest of what's owed. So I'll pause there for a moment. The it fell through the cracks is definitely a DC thing. I think Marvel's version of it is sorry, we're overwhelmed. I think if you've done any work for them, if you've done work for Marvel, it's we're overwhelmed. If you've done work for DC, it's fell through the cracks. Those are the excuses given on both ends. It's crap, for sure. And, not unlike a bunch of other things that we often hear, but yeah. In terms of the royalties, there are major royalty issues that we've had in comics for a long time. If you listen to this channel for any length of time, you know it's true. The part that bugs me is people who report this like it's some kind of, amazing thing. I saw Rich Johnston, who posted a lot of Bill's comments and basically posted we don't get royalties, but didn't comment on it at all. Now, keep in mind, this is a guy who is a quote-unquote news reporter for Bleeding Cool, who never fails to insert, some various weird grudge against, Mark Miller any chance he can get, but never, ever seems to want to do some articles and reporting on the fact that these giant multi-million, in some cases billion-dollar companies can't pay their royalties on time. That seems to me like something that he should report on, and fuck him for not doing that. But anyway, Buckingham continues. Lastly, though, their practices have grown beyond these mere annoyances, prompting some sort of showdown. First, they tried to strong-arm the ownership of Fables from me. When Mark Doyle and Dan Didio first approached me with the idea of bringing Fables back for its 20th anniversary, both gentlemen since fired from DC, mostly. Doyle? Yeah, anyway, during the contract negotiations for the new issues, their legal negotiations tried to make it a condition of the deal that the work would be done as work for hire, effectively throwing the property irrevocably back into the hands of DC. When that work didn't work, their excuse was, sorry, we didn't read your contract going through these negotiations. We thought we owned it. Willingham is not the first to have this situation occur. And 4 different people have said the same. And so it doesn't feel like a coincidence at this point. I guess we can just put it that way, right? That seems to be an excuse. Oh, sorry, we didn't realize you owned the property. Okay. More recently, I think Neil Gaiman had a similar experience for what it's worth. It says, more recently, during talks to try and work out our many differences, DC officers admitted that their interpretation of our publishing agreement and the following media rights agreement is that they could do whatever they wanted with the property. They could change stories or characters any way they wanted. They had no obligation whatsoever to protect the integrity and value of the IP, either from themselves or for third parties who want to radically alter the characters, settings, history, and premises of the story. Nor did they owe me any money for licensing the Fable rights to third parties, since the license wasn't anticipated in the original publishing agreement. When they capitulated on some of the points in a later conference call, promising on the phone to pay me back monies owed for licensing Fables to Telltale Games, for example, in the execution of the new agreement, they reneged on their word and offered the promised amount instead as a consulting fee, which avoided the precedent of admitting this was money owed, and included a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent me from saying anything but nice things about the license, and so on. There's so much more, but these, as I said, are some of the highlights. At that point, since I disagreed on all their new interpretations of the long-standing agreements, we were in conflict. They practically dared me to sue them to enforce my rights, knowing there'd be a long and debilitating process. Instead, I began to consider other ways to go. Okay. There's more about why he did it and everything else. So let me go through it this way. And again, keep in mind, I interviewed this guy and Bill Willingham, and you can read it on the channel, or you can see it on the channel, not read it. I guess you read it if you turn on subtitles, but that would suck. It'd be a terrible experience. Look, my take is this. First off, what Willingham is saying is true. It's also not unique. And you could take that as either good or bad, depending on your interpretation. But the reality is, this is not going to make you feel better, but it's a fact. Corporations are in the business of protecting their own interests. Always. That's what they do. That's how they're built. In many ways, that is the crux, in some cases, of a capitalist system. And it's not me saying capitalism is bad. It's just saying that, gee whiz, in capitalist societies, when there's corporations and money and, all that kind of stuff, artists and things like this tend to get screwed. I hope that's not a controversial statement. If any of you think it is, I'm sorry, but that's also weird. This is how business works. In many cases, companies with lawyers will come up with ways to say, hey, if you sign this agreement, it's going to tilt things in our favor. It's also called contract negotiation. Contracts, and by the way, pro tip for any of you who may not know this already, when you make a contract and you hire a lawyer, your lawyer is basically there to try and get you the best deal humanly possible. That's what they do. That's how they do their work. They're not there to create fair and equitable things for everyone. They're there to get you a good deal. That's how they're built. That's how they're made. That's why they do what they do. If they were trying to get everybody a good deal, they'd be a public servant, not a lawyer. Here's my daughter. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
See, she knows. But that's how the world works. It's designed to make you money and hurt the other person. Does that sound good?
No.
Why not?
It depends. Am I being hurt or am I getting money?
You're getting money.
Oh, then that's fine.
Yeah, but the other person may not be. How do you feel about that?
Well, as long as they're not like my friend or something.
Yeah, so basically you get yours and they get less.
Okay.
And they're not your friends, so you don't ever have to see them or worry about it.
That sounds fine.
There you go. See, my daughter just explained it completely. That is the system that is taking place there. By the way, that's why you hire lawyers. If people were looking out for everybody, you wouldn't need to hire a lawyer. Just make it all work, right?
Sure.
Yeah. You don't know what I'm talking about, do you? Okay. Does it matter?
Sure. If I get money, it matters.
There you go. It's a pure capitalist daughter. I'm so proud of you right now. Yeah. Do you realize sometimes on these videos, I've actually included some of those times when you were really super young and you would say like bad words and I record you?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Does that embarrass you?
Not really.
Okay. Yeah. Because screw them, right?
Sure.
Okay. Anyway, look, good for Bill for putting this in the public domain. Now, does this mean amazing work's going to come out of it? Probably not, because the people who do these stories still have to find their own publishers and put everything out, and that's all on them now. So it's not like this opens up a glory day of other things. And no, stuff like Superman and Wolverine and Spider-Man do not fit into this because they did not have those original deals, right?
Is Spider-Man making money or is he getting?
Okay, okay. You've lost the plot at this point. Anyway, there you go. That's how we're gonna go. That's how we're gonna go. That's how we're gonna do it.
No, that's how we're gonna do it.
That's how we're gonna go it, right?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, let me know your questions in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why? Because we want more money, right?
Yeah. And then you guys get money too.
No, they don't. I get all the money.
Well, they get some money.
No, they get no money.
They get 0.1% interest.
I don't pay them anything. You think the people who listen to this get any money?
They should.
Why? You get all the money. See,
Fine.
okay,
Fine.
yeah, okay. Briefly, my daughter explained socialism and then went back to capitalism.
Okay.
By the way, my daughter is opening up a store where she's selling artwork that she's doing on t-shirts and things. Do you want people to buy that?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll put those links in. Please ignore all of her bad statements against you and buy her t-shirts when they're available, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.